Donald Trump, the US president-elect, has threatened to impose 100% tariffs on BRICS countries if they attempt to create a new currency.
Recently, Donald Trump has sent out a strong warning to the BRICS countries, which includes India, China, Russia, Brazil, and South Africa. He posted on social media. He writes, "We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs." And he also added, they can go find another sucker. Trump's warning is aimed at their plans to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. BRICS countries are trying to break free from the dominance of the dollar in global trade. The BRICS nations have been talking for a while now about reducing the use of the US dollar in international trade, a strategy known as de-dollarization. This simply means that these countries want to stop using the US dollar as the main currency for trade and instead use their own local currencies. For example, countries like China and Russia have already begun to trade with other countries using their currencies instead of the dollar. This is an effort to reduce the control that the US has over global trade and to make their economies less reliant on the US currency. Donald Trump, however, is not happy about this. In a recent social media post, he made it clear that he does not want BRICS nations to replace the US dollar. He said that if these countries continue their push to reduce the use of the dollar, he would impose a 100% tariff on goods coming from those countries. A tariff is a type of tax that increases the price of imported goods. For instance, if an Indian-made car is sold in the United States, a 100% tariff would double its price. So, a car priced at $100,000 in India would cost $200,000 in the US after the tariff is applied. This would make products from BRICS countries much more expensive for American consumers, and Trump is threatening this as a way to punish those countries for their plans to move away from the US dollar. This threat has already caused some reactions from BRICS nations. Russia, for instance, has already spoken out against Trump's warning. Russian officials believe that Trump's threats will only make more countries want to stop using the US dollar. They argue that the United States is pushing nations to look for alternatives to the dollar by using its economic power in unfair ways, like imposing sanctions or freezing assets. Russia argues that by trying to force other countries to use the US dollar will not work. Rather, it is helping to create a world where more countries want to ditch the dollar completely. China, another major member of BRICS, is also pushing for the yuan, its own currency, to be used more in international trade. In recent years, China has been working hard to make its currency, the yuan. It is more widely accepted around the world. The country has already signed agreements with other nations to use the yuan in trade instead of the US dollar. In addition, China's Belt and Road Initiative is a massive infrastructure project that connects China with countries around the world, and it is another reason why the yuan is becoming more widely used. Many countries involved in the Belt and Road Initiative are now trading with China using the yuan rather than the US dollar. India, however, is not entirely on the same page as Russia and China when it comes to moving away from the dollar. While India does want to promote the use of the rupee, its local currency, in international trade, it does not seek to replace the US dollar altogether. India has made it clear that it does not want to challenge the dollar in a way that would upset global economic stability. Indian leaders, including Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, have said that India's policies are not focused on targeting the dollar. Instead, India simply wants to have more of its currency involved in global trade. Despite these differences among BRICS nations, the overall goal of reducing reliance on the US dollar remains strong. The reason behind this movement is that many countries feel that the US has too much control over the global economy because of the dollar's dominance. The United States can impose economic sanctions on countries that don't follow its policies, freeze assets, and block nations from using international payment systems. This gives the US a lot of power over countries that are trading globally, and not everyone is happy with this situation. As a result, more and more countries are exploring the idea of using their own currencies in international trade. Some countries have already begun to move away from the dollar, and this trend seems to be growing. The BRICS nations as a group have become strong advocates for this shift, and their collective power is a significant challenge to the US's position in the global economy. Trump's warning about imposing tariffs on BRICS countries is part of his broader strategy to protect the US dollar. He has used tariffs as a weapon, most famously in his trade war with China. Trump believes that by imposing tariffs on countries that are trying to move away from the dollar, he can force them to back down and continue using the US dollar in global trade. However, the problem with this strategy is that it could end up hurting the US more than the BRICS nations. One of the main reasons why tariffs are a double-edged sword is that they raise the cost of imported goods. If the US imposes a 100% tariff on goods from BRICS countries, those goods become much more expensive for American consumers. This means that American consumers will have to pay more for products that come from these countries, like electronics, cars, and other goods. This could lead to higher prices in the US economy, which could harm American businesses and consumers alike. Moreover, the countries that are targeted by the tariffs may retaliate by imposing their own tariffs on American goods, which could hurt US exports. In this case, American companies that rely on selling products to BRICS nations could find themselves facing higher costs and reduced demand for their products. This could lead to job losses and a slowdown in the US economy. So while Trump's tariffs might seem like a way to punish BRICS countries, it could also have serious consequences for the US. Additionally, the global shift away from the dollar could have long-term consequences for the United States. The US has enjoyed many advantages as the world's reserve currency, including the ability to borrow money at lower interest rates and the ability to impose economic sanctions on other countries. If the US dollar loses its dominance in global trade, the US could face higher borrowing costs, as countries will no longer have to hold US dollars in their reserves. This could lead to increased debt for the US government and higher interest rates for American consumers and businesses. As more countries move away from the dollar, the US could find it more difficult to influence global financial systems. The dollar has long been a symbol of American economic power, and if other countries start using their own currencies more often, it could weaken the US's ability to shape the global economy. Countries that have been on the receiving end of US sanctions or economic pressure may find that using alternative currencies helps them protect their economies from American influence. The rise of alternative currencies, particularly the Chinese yuan, is one of the biggest threats to the US dollar's dominance. China has made significant efforts to promote the yuan as a global currency, and its trade agreements with countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are helping to increase the yuan's role in international trade. As more countries embrace the yuan, it could eventually challenge the US dollar's position as the dominant global currency. In response to Trump's threats, BRICS nations may continue to push for de-dollarization and seek out new ways to work around the US dollar. Russia and China are already moving forward with their plans, and other countries may follow suit. The trend of de-dollarization is not likely to stop, even in the face of US opposition. If anything, Trump's threats could accelerate the process by making other countries more determined to reduce their reliance on the dollar. Ultimately, the battle over the US dollar's dominance is far from over. The global economy is changing, and more countries are looking for ways to reduce their dependence on the US currency. Whether Trump's tariffs can stop this trend remains to be seen, but it's clear that the US dollar's position in the global economy is being challenged like never before. As more nations explore alternatives to the dollar, the United States may find itself increasingly isolated in its efforts to maintain its economic power. The outcome of this ongoing battle will shape the future of global trade and finance, with major implications for both the US and the rest of the world.